My girlfriend broke up with me after I refused to buy her what she wanted. Chapter 1. Kale Dren sat at the corner table of a cozy little cafe called Luna's, one he and Ariana often visited during the early days of their relationship. The warm afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, washing the worn wooden floors in gold. Kalen's sketchpad lay open next to his coffee, half filled with logo drafts for a client he'd picked up last month. The company wanted something bold yet timeless, a reflection of what he always aimed for, like the future he was trying to build with her. He glanced at the time on his watch. 3:27 p.m. She was late, again. Not that it surprised him. Ariana had always lived in her own rhythm. She was dazzling like that, unpredictable, wild, a burst of color in his mostly muted world. They had been together 3 years now, and though things had changed, he still clung to the hope that underneath her growing material desires, the woman he fell in love with was still there. The bell above the door chimed, and Kalen looked up. Ariana strode in, sunglasses perched atop her head, hair pinned in a glossy braid that hung over her shoulder. She wore a deep emerald dress that turned heads as she made her way toward him. She sat down across from him, slipping her phone out without much of a greeting. "Sorry," she said flatly, scrolling through something on her screen. Traffic was hell. He offered a small smile. "It's fine. Glad you made it." She was barely listening. Instead, she swiped to a folder of pictures on her phone and held it out to him. Photos of limited edition handbags, shoes, and clothes from designers Kalen had only heard about because of her. "I know what I want for my birthday," Ariana said brightly, tapping on one of the photos. "This one's from Laravel's new line. It's a collector's piece, only 50 made. You should get it now before they're all gone." Kalen's smile faltered. He gently pushed the phone back toward her and shook his head. "Ari, I don't think I can swing that right now. Things are tight. I'm saving for something important." She blinked at him, frowning. What could be more important than this? He inhaled slowly, steadying himself. "I'm working on something for you. A surprise. For your birthday. I've been pulling double shifts on my projects. I want it to be special. Just not in the way you're thinking." Ariana stared at him as if he were speaking another language. "So you won't get it?" Her voice sharpened, her expression darkening. "I can't promise that right now," Kalen answered carefully. "You already have a lot of the things you wanted last time. I'm trying to focus on something bigger for us." For a second, he thought she might understand. Instead, she gave a cold, humorless laugh and shoved her chair back, the screech loud enough that people nearby turned to look. "If you can't even afford me now, Kalen," she snapped, "then how do you expect to keep up with me in the future?" The words cut deeper than they should have. He felt the sting of them settle in his chest as if they'd been waiting there all along. He stared at her, really seeing her in that moment. The frustration, the impatience, the emptiness where warmth used to be. Kalen pushed his chair back slowly, standing up to face her. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene. He simply nodded, his jaw tight. You're right." She blinked in surprise, thrown off for a beat. "Then we should end things right now. You want to break up because I'm not buying you a bag?" he said, his voice low but firm. "Then maybe we're not who we thought we were." Ariana's eyes narrowed, and her lips twisted into a sneer. "You know what? Fine." She grabbed her purse off the back of the chair. "Asshole." Kalen clenched his teeth but didn't say anything. He watched her walk out of the cafe without looking back, heels clicking sharply on the floor until the door shut behind her. He stood there for a moment, breathing slowly through the rush of embarrassment and the sting of realization. People were staring, but he didn't care. He sat for a while, and after 5 minutes he stood up. He dropped a few bills on the table, closed his sketchpad, and left the cafe. Outside, the late afternoon air was cooler. He took it in, let it settle in his lungs. The world hadn't ended. In fact, it felt strangely lighter. Chapter 2. The streets blurred as Kalen Dren walked, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. His boots thudded against the cracked pavement in a slow, steady rhythm, but his mind was far from the present. Memories surged forward, uninvited and relentless. They flooded his head with flashes of Ariana. The way she smiled that first night they met, her hand brushing his as they both reached for the same sketchbook at a pop-up art exhibit downtown. She had laughed back then. It was real, or at least it had felt real. He had always been careful with people, slow to trust, slow to let anyone in. But Ariana, she'd made him feel like he didn't have to be so guarded, like she saw him, and maybe that's why he worked so hard to keep her happy. He wouldn't have called himself a simp. Not then. He was just willing to do what he could, to give what he could. The bags she mentioned in passing, he bought them. That necklace she stared at for 10 minutes in the shop window before walking away, pretending she didn't care, he found a way to buy that too, surprising her a week later. The weekends she wanted to spend in high-end resorts, he stretched his freelance gigs thin to make it happen. Not because she demanded it. First, because he wanted to. He wanted to see that spark in her eyes when she was happy. He wanted to believe that if he gave her the world, they'd build one together. But now, walking alone through streets that suddenly felt heavier, colder, and emptier, Kaylin could see it clearly. How her smiles slowly became transactional. How her touch came less freely, only there after he gave her something. How the space between them grew wider no matter how much he tried to close it. And today, she hadn't even hesitated. He stopped at the curb, waiting for the light to change, staring blankly at the passing cars. Maybe she never really loved me, he thought. Or maybe she did, but it was the version of me who could buy her what she wanted. Not the version who stayed up all night sketching, fighting deadlines, and trying to make a future from nothing. The thought stung more than he wanted to admit. He exhaled slowly and noticed where his feet had taken him. A narrow alley lined with neon signs, one of which flickered in muted red. Calderon's. A quiet bar he used to visit after long days at the studio. It was still early, not even 5, but Kaylin didn't care. He didn't have anywhere to be now. No reason to rush home and finish the proposal he was going to give her next week. He pushed the door open. The scent of old wood, whiskey, and faint tobacco greeted him like an old friend. The place was mostly empty, just a few regulars hunched over their drinks, murmuring low conversations to the bartender. The lighting was dim, the kind that soaked into your skin and made you feel like you had all the time in the world. Kaylin slid onto a bar stool and signaled the bartender with a nod. "What'll it be?" the man asked, drying a glass. Kaylin thought for a moment. Then whiskey. Straight. The bartender gave him a long look. Kaylin probably wasn't the first guy to show up early looking like hell, and poured the drink without a word. The glass was cool and heavy in Kaylin's hand as he brought it to his lips. The burn that followed was sharp, but he welcomed it. He chased it with another sip, then another. For the first time in months, there was no sketchpad in front of him. No emails to answer. No designs to tweak. Just silence. And a faint ache in his chest he couldn't tell was grief or relief. He swirled the glass slowly, watching the amber liquid catch the dim light. "Here's to you, Ariana," he murmured under his breath. "Thanks for the clarity." And he downed the rest. Maybe he came here to drown himself in old memories. But this would be the last time he let her take up space in his head. Tomorrow he'd draw something new. But tonight he'd empty out what was left of her. Chapter 2. Kaylin sat hunched over the polished bar, the half-empty glass of whiskey warming his fingers as the burn slid down his throat. It was his third, maybe fourth, drink. He wasn't counting. He didn't want to. He just wanted the sharpness in his chest to soften, even if just for a little while. Then his phone buzzed against the bar, vibrating insistently. He ignored it at first, staring at the amber liquid swirling at the bottom of his glass like it held answers. It buzzed again, and again. With a reluctant sigh, Kaylin picked it up and unlocked the screen. A string of messages blinked back at him from his friend's group chat. "Darian, yo, you good, man? Heard what happened. Where are you? Trev, we're around if you want to talk. Or drink. Mostly drink. Seriously though, you okay?" Kaylin stared at the screen for a long second, thumb hovering before he finally typed back. Kaylin. I'm fine. Calderon's. Celebrating. He hit send before he could second-guess the choice of words. Celebrating. It wasn't exactly a lie. He wasn't mourning anymore. Not really. Maybe there was a strange kind of celebration in realizing the truth, painful as it was. He set the phone down and gestured to the bartender. Another. The bartender, who'd been giving him subtle glances every now and then, nodded silently and poured him another round. Kaylin took a sip, slower this time. But no amount of slow was enough to hold back the memories that came crashing in like a waterfall he couldn't stop. Ariana in that silver dress at their friend Myra's engagement party. How she laughed and clung to his arm, drawing all eyes wherever she moved. And how, later that night, she had whispered about a designer necklace she'd seen another woman wearing, dropping hints that she'd like one for herself. Ariana, tapping her manicured nails on the table, scrolling through her phone, telling him she was too busy to make it to his first solo gallery showing. You understand, right? I have a thing with some people at Serrano's, she'd said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement like her mind was already somewhere else. Ariana, pouting when he hesitated about buying her an expensive coat, making him feel like he was the one who had done something wrong. The sting behind his eyes wasn't just the whiskey anymore. Kaylin closed his eyes and scrubbed a hand over his face, the memories clawing at him harder now. He thought he had already emptied himself of her back at the cafe, but apparently, his heart hadn't gotten the message. Then a hand tapped his shoulder, firm and grounding. Kaylin. He flinched slightly and turned. There, standing beside him, was Darian Havith. His friend's dark eyes studied him closely, brows knit together in concern that was too raw to ignore. His grip tightened for a second on Kaylin's shoulder before easing. I've been calling your name for ages, Darian said, half serious, half teasing. But his tone was low, careful. You were a million miles away. Kaylin managed a faint smile and nodded. Yeah. Sorry. Got caught up. In your head again, Darian said knowingly, sliding onto the stool next to him. Dangerous place to be right now, my man. Kaylin huffed a humorless laugh and took another sip of his drink. I'm working on it. Darian glanced at the glass, then back at him. Well, you can work on it over there. Come on. He gestured toward the back of the bar where a wide booth curved along the brick wall, empty for now. I called Trev and Myra. They're coming. Said they'll bring reinforcements. We'll need more space. Kaylin hesitated, his hand tightening around his glass for a second, reluctant to move. But Darian's expression left little room for argument. It wasn't pity on his face, it was something more solid. Steady. The same look he gave Kaylin back when they were broke 20-somethings sharing ramen and trying to get their first freelance gigs off the ground. With a slow exhale, Kaylin set the glass down, leaving it empty. Yeah. All right. Darian gave a nod of approval and tapped his shoulder again before leading the way. Kaylin followed, threading through the dim light and low voices, each step away from the bar feeling a little lighter. Maybe tonight wasn't about drowning anything after all. Kaylin settled into the deep leather couch with a heavy exhale, his shoulders slumping as if he'd just finished carrying the weight of something massive. Darian sat beside him, one arm hooked lazily over the back of the seat, keeping an easy watch on him without making it obvious. The waitress brought over a tray with a bottle of something dark and smooth, a few shot glasses, and an extra round of whiskey, Darian's doing, no doubt. Kaylin poured himself another, though his hand shook a little this time. For a while, they just sat there in silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone long enough not to need words. But finally, Kaylin broke it. How'd you know? His voice was rougher than he intended. That Ariana and it was over. Darian's lips pressed together in a thin line. She posted about it. On her account. Kaylin's brows furrowed as he glanced at his phone lying dark on the table. Posted? Darian sighed and reached for his own phone. Yeah. Look, I wasn't gonna bring it up unless you asked. He tapped through his apps quickly and turned the screen toward him. But you did. Kaylin hesitated, then picked up his phone instead. His fingers moved automatically, muscle memory guiding him through his social media feed even though his stomach twisted tighter with each swipe. And there it was. Ariana's latest post. Finally free. LOL. Can't believe it took me this long to let go of the weight holding me back. Poor guy even had the nerve to say it was his decision. Guess money does buy happiness, just not for some people. And there were more. Comments from her circle echoing the same kind of shallow, empty praise. Some were laughing at the idea that Kalen, of all people, had ended it. Others joked about dodging a broke bullet. He felt the sting deep in his chest. Not just humiliation. Betrayal. That wasn't the Ariana he'd thought he knew. Or maybe it was. Maybe he just hadn't wanted to see it. He locked his phone without another word and set it back on the table, face down this time. Chapter 4. Darian watched him carefully. Worse now, he asked, his voice quiet. Kalen didn't answer immediately. He reached for the glass, drained it in one long pull, and set it back down with a dull thud. His fingers lingered on the rim. Then slowly he cracked a wry smile. Maybe, he said. I don't even know anymore. Darian nodded, letting the silence hold for another beat before Kalen spoke again. She's right, though, Kalen said, his tone lighter, like he was testing the weight of the words out loud. I am poor. Couldn't afford all those things she wanted. He glanced at Darian, the corner of his mouth twitching up in a half-smirk. But you know what? He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. She's poor too. Darian raised a brow. How'd you figure that? Kalen's smirk sharpened just a little, a rare edge cutting through the exhaustion. Because she kept asking me to buy them for her. For half a second, Darian stared. And then he let out a sharp bark of laughter, loud enough to turn a few heads in the bar. Damn, Kale. He grinned wide, shaking his head. Didn't know you had that in you. Kalen chuckled, though the sting in his chest was still there, dull but persistent. Neither did I. They clinked their glasses together without saying anything more. The whiskey warmed Kalen's chest, but it didn't numb the sting behind his ribs. He stared at the dark screen of his phone lying face down on the table. He still felt the heaviness in his gut from reading Ariana's post. The words "free at last" still echoed in his head, along with the bitter taste they left behind. Darian sat next to him in silence, giving him space but not leaving his side. Kalen was grateful for that. He didn't think he could have handled being alone much longer. It wasn't long before more footsteps echoed through the bar. Trev arrived first, his unmistakable swagger cutting through the dim light as he strode toward them, dragging his jacket behind him like it was a cape. His grin was wide and easy, but his eyes were sharp as they flickered to Kalen. There he is, Trev announced, tapping Kalen hard on the back, nearly making him spill his drink. Kalen freaking Dren, in the flesh. Still breathing, I see. Kalen managed a small smirk. Barely. Trev pulled up a chair and flopped down, tossing his jacket over the booth. That's enough. As long as you're still breathing, we can work with that. Right behind him came Myra, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, sleeves of her oversized sweater pushed up to her elbows. She set a tray of drinks and snacks on the table without a word and slid in next to Kalen on the other side. Her gaze was softer than Trev's, but no less concerned. Figured you hadn't eaten, she said simply. You look like you've been living on caffeine and broken dreams. Kalen huffed a quiet laugh. Something like that. Drink, she said, pouring him a glass from the bottle she brought. Eat. Both. Doctor's orders. Darian chuckled. Pretty sure you're not a doctor. I could be, Myra shot back. I watched 3 seasons of ER last week. Kalen smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Then Hugh and Dylan arrived, weaving their way through the growing crowd. Hugh was tall and lanky, wearing his usual rumpled shirt and scarf, his messenger bag slung over one shoulder. Dylan followed close behind, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, tattoos peeking out over his forearms, a pack of cigarettes tucked behind one ear. They both carried an easy, familiar energy that made Kalen's chest ease just a little. Trev said you were getting trashed, Hugh greeted, sliding into a chair. Didn't think it'd be this early, though. Overachiever. You always were an early riser, Dylan added with a grin. I respect the commitment. Kalen shook his head, setting down his glass. It's not what it looks like. Dylan leaned forward on his elbows. What does it look like, then? Kalen exhaled slowly. Like I'm realizing I wasted 3 years of my life. The table went quiet for a moment. Then Trev spoke, his tone less joking this time. You didn't waste anything, Kale. Darian nodded in agreement. You loved her. You gave what you could. That's not a waste. Kalen glanced down at his hands. Doesn't feel that way. Of course it doesn't, Myra said gently. Not right now. Hugh drummed his fingers on the table. You know, I never liked her. Same, Dylan said without hesitation. She always looked down on us. Like we were the messy friends you tolerated because your boyfriend insisted on keeping us around. Kalen gave them both a look, half amused, half resigned. You could have told me. And risk getting cut off from your stash of free sketchbooks? Hugh grinned. Not a chance. Everyone laughed at that, even Kalen. Darian raised his glass. Here's to Kalen, finally seeing things for what they are. Myra followed suit. And to the rest of us. For being here when he does. Trev clinked his glass in. To survival. Hugh and Dylan joined in. To surviving her, Dylan added with a smirk. Kalen hesitated only a second before lifting his glass and clinking it with theirs. To surviving, he echoed quietly. They drank, and for a while, the weight on his chest lessened. Chapter 5. As the minutes stretched into hours, the conversation shifted. Myra teased Dylan about his new tattoo design. Hugh argued with Trev about who had the worst taste in music. Darian told stories about their early freelance days when Kalen was still struggling to land his first big client. Kalen found himself laughing more than he expected. It wasn't forced this time. It was real. The kind of laughter that tugged him back to himself, piece by piece. At one point, Myra nudged him in the ribs and said, "You know, this isn't the end of anything." Kalen gave her a questioning look. "It's the start of something better," she added. "You just don't see it yet." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe." "Definitely," Darian said. "We'll make sure of it." And Kalen believed them. For the first time in a long time, he believed. A week after their breakup, Ariana posted a new photo on her social media. She was wearing a bright, almost glowing smile, her hand delicately placed on the chest of a man Kalen had never seen before. The guy was tall, polished, with an expensive watch flashing on his wrist and a carefully practiced grin that matched Ariana's. The caption beneath the photo read, "The love of my life. Forever." And that wasn't the only thing. Comments flooded in almost immediately. People from her circle were quick to celebrate this new chapter. "Finally. You look so happy together. What a glow-up, girl. He's a total catch. So much better than the last one. You deserve this." Power couple vibes. Kalen never saw the post firsthand. He couldn't. He blocked her after that night at the bar. There was no point in torturing himself, no point in watching her live the life she wanted, at least the life she claimed to want. But Darian mentioned it in passing one evening while they were working late at Kalen's shared studio space. "She moved on fast," Darian said, trying to sound casual, but Kalen could hear the edge in his tone. Kalen didn't look up from his tablet. He was sketching a new logo for a startup tech company, deep in concentration, the stylus moving steadily in his hand. "Good for her," he said simply. Darian watched him for a second. "You're okay." Kalen nodded once. "I'm focused. That's enough for me." And it was. After the breakup, he'd thrown himself into his work. Long nights refining designs, endless cups of coffee, and a steady stream of commissions. He'd finished a complete brand package for an indie clothing label, created illustrations for a children's book, and even taken on a mural project for a local cafe. Each piece was better than the last, his mind clearer now that he wasn't constantly trying to keep someone else happy. For the first time in years, he was working for himself, not for someone else's approval. A month passed and Myra's wedding day arrived. It was a clear, golden afternoon, the sky a soft blue, the breeze gentle enough to lift the edges of the white ribbons tied to the garden chairs. The venue was beautiful, a garden estate outside the city with rows of hanging lights and blooms in shades of cream and pale green. Everything matched the earthy, romantic theme Myra had carefully planned. Kalen arrived with Trev, Darian, Hugh, and Dylan all dressed sharp in their tailored suits. They made their way to the seating area, joking quietly, adjusting ties, but Kalen could feel the faint undercurrent of anticipation running beneath his calm exterior. Ariana would be here. Of course, she would. She and Myra had known each other longer than Kalen had known either of them. Despite everything, Myra hadn't taken sides. She'd made it clear she still valued her friendship with Ariana, and Kalen respected that. He wasn't there for drama. He was there for Myra. He took his seat near the front, close to the rest of his friends, but a little off to the side. He liked having space, and besides, he could get a good view of the ceremony from there. Trev nudged him with an elbow, pointing subtly as Ariana arrived. She was dressed perfectly for the theme, a flowing sage green gown that fit like it had been tailored just for her, hair styled in soft curls, makeup flawless. On her arm was the same man from her post, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Kalen's entire rent for a year. They looked like a couple straight out of a lifestyle magazine. Kalen didn't flinch, didn't stare. He glanced their way once, then shifted his focus to the floral archway where Myra and her fiancé would soon stand. But Ariana noticed him. She kept glancing toward where he sat, her gaze flicking over him in between her bright smiles at the people around her. Every so often, her fingers tightened on her new boyfriend's arm as if reminding herself of something. Kalen's friends noticed it too. "She's watching you," Hugh murmured, without looking directly at her. "Let her," Kalen replied calmly, adjusting his cufflink. Dylan chuckled under his breath. "You're handling this like a champ." Kalen gave him a small smile. "I'm here for Myra." And he was. When Myra walked down the aisle a little later, radiant in her dress, her joy so palpable it was impossible not to feel it. Kalen stood with everyone else, his hands steady as he clapped, his heart light. He was truly happy for her. Chapter 6. As the ceremony ended and the reception began under the soft glow of hanging lights, Kalen mingled, laughing at old stories with his friends, taking pictures, and even showing off a few dance moves he'd been reluctant to learn. He caught Ariana's gaze more than once, and each time, he smiled politely and turned away. Let her have her life. He thought. He was finally ready to live his. The reception was in full swing, the music lively, laughter bubbling through the air like champagne. Kalen was genuinely enjoying himself, the weight of the past slowly fading into the background. As he stood near the open bar, sipping his drink and listening to Dylan's exaggerated retelling of a story from their college days, a soft voice called his attention. "Excuse me." Kalen turned, finding himself face to face with a woman he hadn't seen before. She had warm brown eyes that sparkled under the soft lights, her dark hair styled effortlessly over her shoulder. Her dress, a simple yet elegant navy blue, complemented her graceful demeanor. "I'm Selah," she introduced herself, offering a polite smile. "Cousin of the groom." Kalen straightened slightly, giving her a friendly nod. "Kalen, friend of the bride." "I figured," she said with a small laugh. "I've heard Myra mention you a few times." Kalen raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned?" "Not at all," Selah assured him, playfulness dancing in her tone. "She said you were a great guy, and from what I've seen tonight, I can tell she wasn't lying." He chuckled, taken aback by how easily the conversation flowed. They talked for a while about the wedding, their work, their shared appreciation for art and design. Kalen learned that Selah worked in interior design, and she was fascinated by branding and visual aesthetics, which naturally led to discussions about his freelance work. "I'd love to see more of what you do," Selah said after a while. "Do you mind if I get your number or social media?" Kalen blinked, momentarily caught off guard. He hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because he hadn't expected this. Just a month ago, he would have laughed at the idea of meeting someone new. But now, as he glanced toward his group of friends, he found them watching with amused expressions. Darian gave him an exaggerated thumbs up. Trev and Hugh made okay gestures, and Dylan dramatically mimed a heart with his hands. Kalen let out a small chuckle, shaking his head before returning his gaze to Selah. "Sure," he said, pulling out his phone. They exchanged numbers, and Selah quickly added him on social media. The gesture felt simple, easy, nothing forced, no pressure. Just two people enjoying a good conversation. "Great," she said, smiling as she saved his contact. "I'll send you a message later. Maybe we can talk more when things aren't so hectic." "I'd like that," Kalen admitted, surprising himself with how much he meant it. As they continued chatting and sipping their drinks, the reception carried on around them. His friends, noticing how engaged he was, left him be, continuing with their own conversations and dances. Then, amidst the celebrations, Myra and her new husband, Elias, approached their table. Kalen stood up, shaking Elias's hand firmly before turning to Myra. "Congratulations again, Myra. The wedding was incredible. You look amazing." "Thank you, Kalen," she said with a knowing smile. "And I see you finally met her." Kalen frowned slightly. "Her?" Selah laughed, nudging Myra lightly. "You set this up, didn't you?" "Not exactly," Myra said innocently, but the mischievous glint in her eyes said otherwise. "I just hoped you two would meet. Looks like fate did the rest." Kalen rolled his eyes but smiled nonetheless. Selah grinned. "Well, I'm glad we did meet." Kalen found himself smiling back. "Me too." And for the first time in a long while, he felt something unfamiliar but welcome, a sense of something new. Something worth exploring. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something better. Chapter 7. Elias gave his cousin Selah a knowing look, as he and Myra walked away toward Darian and the others. It was a silent message, behave yourself, one that made Selah chuckle as she shook her head. Kalen, curious, turned to her. "So, how exactly are you related to Elias?" "We're first cousins," she said, picking up a glass of wine from a passing server. "His mom and my dad are siblings." She took a sip before adding, "And he's been quite the bully since we were kids." Kalen smirked. "Elias? A bully?" Selah laughed. "Oh, not in a terrible way. Just the usual older cousin teasing. Always hiding my toys. Telling me I was adopted. That kind of thing." She shook her head with an amused sigh. But he's a good guy. Just enjoys messing with me when he gets the chance. Kalen found himself genuinely enjoying their conversation. They grabbed some food and continued talking as they mingled through the reception, the night unfolding in a warm blur of laughter, music, and celebration. The next morning, Kalen woke up to the soft hum of his phone vibrating on the nightstand. He lazily reached for it, expecting a work-related message or something from one of his friends. Instead, an unknown number flashed across the screen. The text read, "So that's it? You're already smiling like nothing happened? Laughing with another woman like you weren't madly in love with me just a month ago? You think you can replace me that easily? Pathetic." Kalen exhaled sharply through his nose, immediately knowing who it was. Ariana. He didn't even bother to reply. He blocked the number instantly, tossing his phone onto the bed. She had moved on first. She had flaunted her new relationship for the world to see. So why did it bother her so much that he was simply smiling? That he had spent the night at a wedding, talking to someone new, enjoying himself without her shadow looming over him? Instead of letting it ruin his day, he shook it off and got ready for work. Since Kalen was a freelance artist, he didn't have a strict schedule. He didn't have to drag himself into an office at a set time, and that was something he appreciated. Instead, he met up with his friends at their shared studio space, a loft where they worked on different creative projects, from branding and logo designs to illustrations and advertising concepts. The hours passed in a blur of work and casual conversation. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Kalen and Darian packed up their things and decided to head home together. But as they stepped outside, Kalen's movements slowed. Standing near the entrance, seemingly waiting for him, was Ariana. Darian muttered a curse under his breath, his smirk widening as he nudged Kalen lightly. "Well, this should be interesting." Kalen sighed, already bracing himself. Ariana, dressed impeccably as always, strode forward with a look of determination. "We need to talk." Kalen kept his hands in his pockets, his voice neutral. "We can talk here." Ariana frowned. "Somewhere private." "No," he said, firm. "Whatever you have to say it now." She hesitated, glancing at Darian. He wasn't even trying to hide his amusement. With no other choice, she asked, "Are you dating Sayla?" Kalen raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "That's none of your business." Ariana took a step closer, her voice dropping to something softer. "Kalen, you can't." She reached out as if to touch his hand, but he was quick, stepping back before she could. Ariana's jaw tightened. "You're not allowed to be in a new relationship." Darian let out a low whistle. "Wow, bold move." Kalen, flustered and rapidly growing furious, narrowed his eyes. "Excuse me? You're still in love with me?" Ariana declared, her voice shaking slightly, though whether from anger or something else, Kalen couldn't tell. "I know you are. You don't get to move on just like that. You don't get to replace me like I was nothing." Kalen's patience snapped. "You have the audacity to tell me what I can and can't do?" His voice was low, controlled, but filled with restrained fury. Ariana opened her mouth, but he cut her off. "Who are you to decide when I can move on?" His tone sharpened, his stance unwavering. "You were the one who threw me away like I wasn't good enough for you. You didn't hesitate to flaunt your new relationship, to paint me as the villain. And now you care about what I do." Ariana's expression wavered. "That's not. You called me pathetic?" His voice dropped, but it carried weight. "You jumped into another man's arms the second you left me. But you expect me to sit around, broken and waiting for you?" Darian let out a low chuckle. "Damn." Ariana clenched her fists. "You loved me." Kalen scoffed. "I did love you. I gave you everything I could. But love isn't a one-way street, Ariana. And it sure as hell isn't something you get to control even after you walk away." She looked taken aback, as if she hadn't expected him to push back this hard. Kalen exhaled sharply. "Move on, Ariana, because I already have." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, Darian following beside him, still smirking. "Man," Darian said after a few steps, "I think that's the first time I've ever seen you truly stand up to her." Kalen huffed out a breath. Felt damn good. Darian slung an arm around his shoulder. Damn right it did. Now let's grab a drink. You deserve it. And for the first time in a long while, Kaylin felt free. Chapter 8. For a while, after their last confrontation, Ariana had gone silent. And for Kaylin, that silence was bliss. No unexpected messages. No dramatic encounters. No reminders of the past trying to drag him down. He poured himself into work, spending long hours at the studio refining his projects. His time with his friends felt lighter, no longer weighed down by lingering resentment or frustration. His conversations with Sayla had become more frequent, easy and refreshing. Felt like, for once, he was truly free. But that peace was shattered when his phone buzzed with multiple notifications. At first, he ignored them, assuming they were work-related or just messages from his friends. But as the notifications kept coming, his curiosity got the better of him. Unlocking his phone, his stomach twisted as he saw his name trending on social media. Ariana had posted something. It wasn't just any post, it was an accusation. A long, dramatic paragraph about how Kaylin had manipulated her while they were together. How he would pressure her into doing things for him, and in return he would buy her gifts. How she had been trapped in a toxic, transactional relationship where she had no choice but to comply. The internet was quick to react. Some people were outraged. Men like him are the worst. Using gifts to control women. Disgusting. So all those expensive things weren't out of love but just a way to keep her tied down? That's sick. Others defended him. I've known Kaylin for years. This is so out of character for him. Sounds like someone is bitter her ex moved on faster than she expected. She literally dumped him over a designer bag. Now she's playing victim. And then there were those who turned against Ariana. So, let me get this straight. You took the gifts willingly, but now it's a problem? Why didn't you say anything before? Oh, right, because you were too busy spending his money. This is why people need to be careful who they date. Some people will twist anything just to get attention. Kaylin stared at the screen, his chest tightening. He felt a wave of emotions hit him: anger, frustration, hurt. He had never manipulated Ariana. If anything, he had spent their relationship bending over backward to make her happy, only to be discarded the moment he couldn't provide what she wanted. But now she was trying to rewrite history, twisting the truth to make herself look like the victim. His hands clenched into fists. Dude, Darian's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. I saw the post. You good? Kaylin let out a slow breath. No, he admitted. But I will be. Darian nodded. Look, we all know that's bullshit. And so do most people. Kaylin exhaled, rubbing his face. It's just frustrating. It's Ariana, Darian said simply. Are you really surprised? No. He wasn't. But despite the negativity, Kaylin quickly realized something: his circle remained strong. His friends stood by him, vocally shutting down the rumors. His longtime clients, people who had worked with him from the start of his career, didn't believe the accusations. They reached out to check in on him, assuring him that they knew his character and wouldn't be swayed by baseless drama. Even some industry professionals who had only interacted with him a few times spoke up, vouching for his professionalism and integrity. And Sayla? She sent him a simple text. Don't let it get to you. The people who matter know the truth. I'm here if you need to talk. Kaylin let out a slow breath. The accusations stung, but they wouldn't break him. He wasn't the person Ariana was painting him to be. And the people who truly mattered knew that. Still, one thing was clear: Ariana wasn't done. And if she wanted a fight, Kaylin was done playing the quiet ex. It was time to set the record straight. Chapter 9. Kaylin sat in silence, his fingers tapping against his desk as he stared at his phone. His name was still trending online, and though some people defended him, the accusations Ariana had made continued to spread like wildfire. For a moment, he debated letting it go, taking the high road and ignoring her entirely. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that silence could be mistaken for guilt. She had painted him as a manipulative, controlling partner. And he refused to let her rewrite history. He exhaled sharply and looked at Darian. I'm doing a live broadcast. Darian, who had been scrolling through the comment sections of Ariana's post, glanced up. You sure? I need to clear my name. Kaylin's voice was firm. And I need your help setting it up. Darian smirked. Damn right, let's expose the hell out of her. The next evening, Kaylin and Darian were in the studio setting up for the live stream. Darian adjusted the lighting while Kaylin made sure the camera angle was right. On the table beside him was a folder filled with evidence. Chat screenshots of Ariana repeatedly asking him for expensive gifts, some even with guilt-tripping tactics. Old social media posts where she had proudly shown off the things he had bought her, thanking him and calling him the best boyfriend. A series of messages from their relationship where she canceled on him last minute, used excuses when he needed her support, and even belittled his work when he was struggling with a project. A voice recording from a past argument where Ariana had snapped at him, calling him useless when he told her he couldn't afford to buy her something expensive. And the most damning of all, a video recording from the cafe the day they broke up. Someone, whether a stranger or someone who knew them, had recorded the entire scene. The footage showed Kaylin calmly explaining his financial situation while Ariana pouted, begged, and eventually screamed at him, calling him useless and embarrassing before storming off. When Kaylin first received the video from an anonymous sender, he was surprised. But now it would serve as undeniable proof of the truth. Darian clapped his hands together. "All right, man. You ready?" Kaylin took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's do this." As soon as Kaylin went live, the viewer count shot up rapidly. People were clearly eager to hear his side, whether they were there to support him or just for the drama. He started calmly. "Hey, everyone. I wasn't planning on addressing this at first, but I've seen the accusations against me and I think it's important to clear things up." He pulled up the first piece of evidence, Ariana's chat messages. "As you can see, Ariana frequently asked me to buy her things. I never once forced her to do anything in exchange for gifts. In fact, it was always her coming to me asking for expensive items." He scrolled through messages where she demanded designer bags, high-end clothing, and even an expensive vacation. "Here's a message where I told her I couldn't afford something at the moment. And here's her response." He highlighted a message that read, "If you really loved me, you'd make it happen." The comments started flooding in. Wow, she really used the "if you love me" card? Damn, she played herself with these messages. This completely contradicts her claims. Kaylin continued, his tone remaining steady. "I also want to address what she said about me manipulating her. Here's a recording from a past argument." He played the voice clip where Ariana's tone was sharp and entitled. "You're useless, Kaylin. If you can't even buy me the things I want, what's the point of being with you?" The chat went wild. "Oh my god. She really said that? And she's out here acting like she was the victim?" Kaylin sighed. "And now here's a video from the day we broke up." The screen played the footage from the cafe. The audience watched as Ariana whined and complained, then yelled at him in public before storming out. The video ended with Kaylin sitting there, clearly embarrassed but composed. Silence flooded the chat for a moment before the comments exploded. She literally humiliated him in public. And now she's saying he manipulated her? Nah. She just ruined herself. This is the clearest example of projection I've ever seen. Kaylin let the responses sink in before looking directly into the camera. "I'm not doing this to get back at her. I just want the truth to be known. I never manipulated anyone. I gave her everything I could, and it was never enough for her. And now that I've moved on, she's trying to drag me down." He exhaled. "I won't let her." Chapter 10. The moment Kaylin ended the live stream, social media exploded. People who once doubted him now took his side. Hashtags started trending, calling out Ariana's lies. Even some of her own friends began distancing themselves from her, realizing they had been fed a twisted version of the truth. Her post, which initially painted her as the victim, was now flooded with backlash. "Care to explain the actual evidence against you? You really thought you could get away with this? The fact that you tried to ruin his reputation just because he moved on? Pathetic." Some people still clung to her side, but the majority had turned against her. Kaylin, for the first time in weeks, felt a weight lift from his chest. Darian grinned, tapping him on the back. "Dude, you just obliterated her." Kaylin chuckled, though he still felt emotionally drained. "I just wanted the truth out there. And now it is," Darian said. "And she's got nowhere to run." Kaylin's phone buzzed. He glanced down and saw a message from Sayla. "Proud of you." A small smile tugged at his lips. Maybe this chapter of his life was finally closing for good. And maybe, just maybe, something better was waiting ahead. Ariana sat stiffly on the couch, her eyes glued to the screen as Kaylin's live stream played in front of her. At first, she had scoffed. expecting him to fumble or look desperate. But as more damning evidence was revealed, her expression changed. By the time the video from the cafe played, her face had gone pale. Beside her, Leon, her current boyfriend, leaned forward, arms crossed, his jaw tightening. He hadn't said a word since the stream started, but Ariana could feel the shift in his demeanor. When the video ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Leon stood up. Ariana snapped out of her daze. "Where are you going?" He grabbed his jacket. "Leaving." Panic surged in her chest. She shot up from the couch and ran toward him, grabbing his arm before he could reach the door. "Leon, don't believe what he said. He's twisting everything." Leon turned, his gaze icy. "Twisting?" His voice was calm, but there was disgust in it. "Ariana, I saw the messages. I heard your voice in the recording. You manipulated him for gifts, and then you trashed his name because he wouldn't play along anymore." Ariana shook her head rapidly, gripping his arm tighter. "No, I only asked for things because I thought he wanted to. He loved spoiling me. I didn't do anything wrong." Leon scoffed. "Didn't do anything wrong?" He yanked his arm free. "So I guess it was just my imagination when you started hinting at expensive watches and new shoes after your birthday? When you said they'd look so good on you and that I'd be the best boyfriend if I got them for you." Ariana's mouth opened, but no words came out. Leon shook his head. "You didn't love Kaylin. And you don't love me either. You just love what we can give you." Ariana felt the blood drain from her face. "I'm done," Leon said firmly. "And I want every single thing I gave you returned. Clothes, jewelry, the bag, everything. I don't care if you sold some of it, I expect it back." Her chest tightened. "Leon, please?" "No," he cut her off, voice sharp. "I don't date liars." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving her standing in the middle of the living room, shaking. The second Leon left, Ariana collapsed onto the couch, clutching her head. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. This wasn't supposed to happen. Kaylin was supposed to be suffering. He was supposed to be drowning in hate, not turning the tables on her. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, expecting a message of sympathy from one of her friends. But instead, she saw her mother's name. "Mom." A lump formed in her throat. Slowly, she picked up the call. "Hello?" Ariana Jane Verlies. Her mother's voice boomed through the speaker, making her flinch. "What on earth have you done?" Ariana swallowed hard. "Mom, Don't you, Mom, me? What is this mess I'm seeing online? How dare you lie about someone like that?" Your father and I raised you better than this," her mother snapped. "We didn't raise a daughter who extorts her boyfriends for gifts and ruins their reputations when she doesn't get her way." Ariana gritted her teeth. "It's not like that, I swear." "Enough." Her mother's sharp tone made her stomach twist. "We are ashamed of you," her mother continued. "And do you know what's worse? People are sending us messages now, asking if we raised you to be a manipulative, materialistic girl. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" Tears welled in Ariana's eyes. "Mom, please? You're coming home. Tonight." "What?" "No, No arguments," her mother snapped. "You'll come home and we'll discuss what happens next. I don't care what plans you had, pack your bags and get here now." Before Ariana could plead further, the call ended. For a few seconds, she just sat there, staring blankly at her phone. Everything was falling apart. Her boyfriend had dumped her. Her friends had stopped defending her. And now even her own parents wanted nothing to do with her. Her hands curled into fists. This was all Kaylin's fault. Her mind spun, desperately searching for a way to fix this, to claw her way back up. But for the first time in her life, she had no idea how. Days passed quickly, and Ariana's once lavish life had turned into a strict, controlled existence under her parents' watchful eyes. They had sent someone to forcibly bring her home, fearing she might try to run away and escape the consequences of her actions. At home, she was stripped of her privileges, no shopping sprees, no weekend getaways, and certainly no fancy gifts from men. They also told her to give compensation for the things she had asked from Kaylin, and what Leon gave him were sent back. Her parents made it clear that she would have to work to regain their trust, and for the first time in years, Ariana had to live without the luxury she had grown so accustomed to. As the weight of her actions sank in, she made one last social media post. "I'm sorry for everything I've said and done. I know it's too late, but I want to take responsibility. After this, I will be deactivating my account. To Kaylin, I was wrong. I hurt you and I have no excuse. I hope you find happiness even if it's not with me. People online quickly took screenshots of her post, some sharing it with their friends, while others left comments debating whether her apology was genuine. Some sympathized with her, while others reminded everyone of the pain she had caused Kaylin. Regardless, the damage had been done, and as promised, her account disappeared the next day. Chapter 11. While Ariana's life crumbled, Kaylin thrived. He and Sayla were growing closer every day. Their conversations were effortless, filled with laughter, teasing, and deep discussions about their ambitions. Unlike with Ariana, where his relationship often felt transactional, Sayla never asked him for anything. She was kind, independent, and genuinely interested in him as a person, not just as someone who could provide her with material things. Kaylin also found himself spending more time with his friends, something he had missed while being wrapped up in Ariana's demands. Myra, who had just returned from her honeymoon, caught up on the whole scandal through her friends. When she finally read Ariana's last post, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "Karma really did its job." Darian, Trev, Dylan, and Hugh all encouraged Kaylin to embrace this fresh start. They spent their weekends hanging out, discussing work, and just enjoying the simple things that Kaylin had forgotten during his time with Ariana. But the biggest change came when Kaylin decided to take a leap of faith. With his career as a freelance designer flourishing, he realized that he no longer wanted to just work for others, he wanted to build something of his own. Sitting in their usual studio one evening, Kaylin brought up the idea to Dylan and Trev. "What if we started our own design company?" he said, his voice filled with excitement. Dylan raised an eyebrow. "You mean, like an actual company?" "Our own brand." Kaylin nodded. "Yeah. We already have the talent. We're getting bigger projects and clients trust us. Why not make it official?" Trev leaned back in his chair, considering it. "It does make sense. We're basically a team already, just without a name or structure." As they discussed it further, Darian and Hugh got involved as well, offering their support and even suggesting potential investors. "If you're serious about this," Hugh said, "I can help you get the funding. I know some people who'd be interested." Darian grinned. "And I'll be your first investor." Kaylin felt a rush of gratitude. This was it, the next big chapter of his life. With everything falling into place, Kaylin realized how much he had changed since breaking free from Ariana's influence. He was happier, more focused, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about him. His days were filled with designing, meetings, and planning for his new company. His nights were spent with friends, sharing drinks and laughter, reliving the moments he had missed before. And somewhere in between all that, Sayla had become a constant in his life, someone who brought him peace and excitement all at once. As he sat with his friends one evening, looking at the plans for his company, he couldn't help but smile. He had been through heartbreak, betrayal, and public humiliation. But in the end, he had come out stronger. And for the first time in a long while, he was truly looking forward to the future. The end. If you like this story, hit like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Till next time.